How does the kid his own mother calls dumb as soup, the brother his genius sibling later refers to as a mouth-breathing idiot, the one nobody in the family really pays attention to unless they need something, end up the one who actually holds the whole family together, and by the time the dust settles, he's the one running the most successful tire chain in the state of Texas?
Is this Georgie?
Yes.
While his Nobel Prize-winning brother still can't remember to say thank you. Today we're covering the entire story of Georgie Cooper Jr., better known as Georgie, easily the most overlooked, underestimated, and quietly resentful character in this entire universe, and also, somehow, the one who ends up being right about almost everything that actually matters.
I don't think so.
I'm just saying she's a good kid. Be glad she's still asking.
We're going to walk through his whole life, from the kid living in his little brother's shadow to the man who becomes the actual backbone of this family, without ever really getting the credit for it. All right, let's get into it. So before we get to the tire stores and the tragedy, we got to talk about who Georgie is inside his own house, because the label gets slapped on him early and it never really comes off. Mary, his own mother, calls both him and his sister Missy dumb as soup at one point, and honestly, that's kind of the whole family's baseline opinion of him for most of his childhood.
How dumb do you think I am?
In my defense, you used to be dumber.
He's the older brother of Sheldon Cooper, the actual genius of the family, at almost 5 years older than Sheldon and his twin sister Missy. Where Sheldon gets the brain, Georgie gets stuck constantly being compared to a 9-year-old who's already better at everything academic than he is. At home, Georgie plays football because that's what you do in Medford, Texas when your dad coaches the team. He's not particularly great at it either, honestly kind of a mediocre player just trying to get through practice. But even the wins don't fully belong to him. In one game, Georgie actually scores the touchdown that wins it. Except the team only wins because Sheldon used math to call the plays.
Yard line, the opposing team has a 92% chance of scoring. When they punt from deep in their own territory, the other team still has a 77% chance of scoring. But since they convert on fourth down 50% of the time, the math says they should never punt again.
Okay, you can tell me. Who's his real daddy?
For the next 5 weeks, I continued to help my father apply statistics to coach his team. Not surprisingly, they continued to win, which changed my status in the school dramatically. It was a nightmare.
So even in the one moment where Georgie gets to be the hero, his little brother's brain is quietly doing the real work behind the scenes. Georgie feels neglected constantly because whatever he does, there's always a genius 5 years younger stealing the spotlight without even trying. He struggles in school too, bad at math specifically, to the point where a failing grade threatens to get him kicked off the football team entirely. Sheldon tries to help him study, and Georgie ends up cheating by writing answers on his shoe, something Sheldon actually catches him doing. Georgie's defense is basically, don't tell mom and dad, it'll break their hearts, which from a kid who's supposedly the dumb one is actually a pretty sharp read on how to manipulate a situation. He's not stupid, he's just never been the one people expect anything smart from. There's also a quieter, sadder detail buried in here. Georgie was conceived before his parents were married, and Mary decides she's only going to tell him the truth about that once he turns 30.
So I was a mistake?
No.
That's the kind of family Georgie grows up in. Secrets get kept from him for his own good, decisions get made about his life without him in the room, and everyone assumes he's too dumb or too fragile to handle the truth about his own existence. As a teenager, Georgie falls hard for a girl named Veronica Duncan, and this relationship pretty much sums up his whole teenage experience. He likes her, she gets really into religion, he starts going to church and even gets baptized, not out of faith but purely to get close to her. The second he gets baptized, he kisses her, she punches him in the face, both of them get grounded. Later, when Veronica breaks up with her boyfriend, Georgie writes her an actual love letter, which promptly gets snatched and read out loud in front of the entire school by another kid. For weeks afterward, everyone at school calls him Lovey Cooper. The kid tries to build up the nerve to be vulnerable exactly once, and the entire school turns into a punchline. Around this same stretch, Georgie shows the first real glimpse of what he's actually good at, and it has nothing to do with football or grades. He convinces his dad to let him try a small business idea, buys up a stash of cheap Texas snow globes from a local shop, haggles the price down hard, dresses himself up in a suit, and goes door to door selling them to the neighbors. He gets rejected a few times, but he closes deal after deal and comes home dumping a pile of cash on the floor in front of his family. Nobody in that house has ever called Georgie smart, but nobody's ever seen him hustle like that either. This is basically the first sign of the businessman he's eventually going to become, years before anyone in his family bothers to notice it. By his senior year, Georgie is failing to see the point of finishing high school at all, and he ends up dropping out to focus entirely on working as a salesman. A decision that horrifies his parents, but honestly tracks with everything we've just watched. This is a kid who spent his whole life being told he's not the smart one, so why would he stick around in a building built entirely to measure that exact thing? Now here's where the story most people know starts. Georgie, 17 years old, high school dropout, working a shift at his grandmother's laundromat, meets a woman named Mandy fixing a broken washing machine. He lies about his age, tells her he's 21. She is actually 29. They fall into a relationship built on that lie, and it eventually catches up with both of them when Mandy discovers the truth and, not long after, discovers she's pregnant. What follows is total chaos for this family. Georgie has to tell his boss Dale before he can even work up the courage to tell his own parents. When he finally does, his father is too stunned to even get angry, and his devoutly religious mother demands he marry Mandy immediately and raise the baby in the church. No room for negotiation.
I'm gonna have a baby.
Are you kidding me?
It's true.
You're gonna have to marry her.
I think so too.
Mandy's own parents, the McAllisters, disown her the second they find out, while Georgie's family, chaotic as they are, take her in instead. Around this same stretch, Georgie and Meemaw get arrested together on an unrelated cigarette smuggling run gone wrong, landing him briefly behind bars while his father has to come bail him out, disappointed all over again. Through all of it, Georgie tries, in his own messy, underqualified way, to actually step up. He gets Mandy a car. He supports her through the pregnancy. He panics the moment the baby, a daughter they name Constance, or Cece for short, is actually born, but he shows up anyway. He proposes to Mandy on his 18th birthday, right in the middle of a whole other awkward situation, and eventually the two of them get married at City Hall in a tiny, spiteful, non-religious ceremony after both of their mothers spend months manipulating the wedding plans behind each other's backs. And then, right as things finally start looking like they might settle down for this family, tragedy hits. George Cooper Sr., Georgie's father, the football coach who never got everything he wanted out of life but tried his best every single day, has a sudden heart attack and dies. It happens fast, and it happens right as the family's getting ready for a photo shoot, of all things. A small, normal, happy moment interrupted forever. Georgie is the one who has to help hold the family together in the immediate aftermath. He grabs a suit for his dad's funeral. He tries to stop a fight between his grieving siblings. At the funeral itself, he speaks to the crowd about how his father always had his back no matter what trouble Georgie caused growing up. And privately, at the casket, he promises his dad that he won't let him down. 19 years old, a wife, a baby, a dead father, and suddenly the unspoken man of the house. This is the real turning point for Georgie, even more than the wedding or the baby, because from this moment forward, he's not just some directionless dropout anymore. He's the one who has to be there. His mother is a wreck, his teenage sister is grieving in her own volatile way, his genius little brother, off at college and then Germany chasing his own academic dreams, is nowhere near around, let alone equipped to hold any of this together. So it falls on Georgie, the one everyone always assumed was the least capable Cooper kid, to actually run the household in every way that matters. The years that follow are a genuine grind. Georgie and Mandy move in with their disapproving parents, the McAllisters, working at his father-in-law Jim's tire shop while dealing with a coworker who resents him, a mother-in-law who barely tolerates him, and a young marriage that's stress-tested from basically day one. Mandy hides thousands of dollars of old debt from him. He develops a habit of keeping his own secrets from her, too, whether it's about a side job at a church trying to drum up new customers, or his father-in-law's not-so-innocent annual trip to a tire convention that's actually a gambling weekend in disguise. Through all of it, Georgie keeps trying, genuinely trying to be a good husband and father, even when he has no real model for what that's supposed to look like, since the one man who could have taught him is gone. Eventually, Georgie partners with a coworker and manages to scrape together enough money to buy the tire shop from his father-in-law before it gets sold to the family's longtime business rival. The kid who couldn't hold a part-time job a year earlier becomes a business co-owner in his early 20s, purely through hustle, the exact same hustle he showed off years earlier hawking snow globes door-to-door as a teenager that nobody in his family ever gave him credit for. Now here's the part of Georgie's story that really refrains everything that came before it. Fast forward years later, and Georgie now goes by George. He's dropped the childhood nickname entirely, the same way he's dropped the identity everyone assumed he'd be stuck with forever. He's built his tire business into an entire chain, and by this point, it's the most successful tire chain in the entire state of Texas. Fast forward decades later, all the way to the Big Bang Theory, right before Sheldon's wedding to Amy. Sheldon reaches out to his little brother, the one who stayed behind in Texas while Sheldon went off chasing his own academic future, and George is furious. Not because he's bitter about his own life, because Sheldon only ever reaches out when he needs something. And George has to actually say it out loud, face to face, for the first time in years. He tells Sheldon flat out that their mother was a mess, and their sister was a wild teenager after their father died, and Sheldon was nowhere to be found, off in Germany living out his own dream, while George was the one left holding the family together back home. And then comes the detail that really puts a bow on this whole story. In that same conversation, George admits he holds real resentment toward Sheldon. Not for being smart, but for being the golden child their mother's most proud of, despite everything George sacrificed to actually build something real. He was the one who looked after Sheldon growing up too, smoothing things over for bullies and apologizing on his behalf, quietly protecting the brother who was too different to protect himself, and never getting so much as a thank you for it. Even years later, as a grown man running the most successful business in his entire family, George still can't fully escape his mother's low opinion of him. At one point, Mary is overheard referring to a woman George was dating in less than flattering terms, refusing to pass down a family ring to her, while somehow finding room to bless whoever their golden child Sheldon ends up marrying instead. The dumb one label never fully goes away, even once he's the most financially successful person in the entire family. And here's the final twist to Georgie's story. Quiet but devastating if you sit with it. By the time we catch up with him as an adult, it's revealed he's been married and divorced not once, but twice. Whatever happened with Mandy, and whatever came after her, this is a man who spent his adult life trying to build the stable family he lost the blueprint for the moment his own father died at that photo shoot. By the time Sheldon wins his Nobel Prize, George has already been through both of those divorces, a detail played as a quick line on screen, but underneath it, it shows a guy who's tried twice as hard at love as anyone else in his family, and still hasn't quite landed it the way his father and mother once did. So that's really the whole story of Georgie Tooper, the kid everyone in his own house called dumb, the brother who got compared to a genius since the day that genius could talk, the teenager who got publicly humiliated the one time he tried to be vulnerable, and the son who ended up being the only one steady enough to actually hold this family together when it mattered most. He built an empire out of the same hustle nobody in his family ever bothered to notice. He raised a child, buried his father, and kept the household from completely falling apart, all while curing the quiet, permanent hurt of never quite being the one his mother was proud of, forgotten by his own family in all the ways that actually count. And yet somehow, when it came time for someone to actually step up, he was the only one who did.